four major takeaways from us is one, we should fund aging and prevention research with the same commitment we do for late stage diseases. Yeah. Let's focus on drivers of aging related conditions so we can address them earlier and better. My second point is that clinicians should be trained for prevention and personalized medicine as a craft. I think they should be integrated deeply into our medical education, not just in executive master's programs, from the very beginning, treating prevention with the same rigor as acute care, and also so we can design individualized and personalized care. My third of 4 points is I think the public really deserves clear, unbiased translation of health science. My final point is I think preventive medicine, we should make it easier for people to employ it than to avoid it. So I think we should have insurance companies understand the value of long-time investments tools, as well as research funding. Longevity medicine, which was a theme for today, it shouldn't be boutique care for the lucky few. It should be something for all of us, and that's my final point.
Because it's very lengthy process and it's very complex to prove efficacy in longevity medicine. How do we fit these medications into current health systems?
So for me, this is a very important question, Tim, because longevity medicine is unlike traditional medicine in how we study and deliver it, right? The first challenge I see is even designing the studies is very complex and lengthy because traditional trials are target like one disease, but here we are aiming to influence the whole biology of aging, which drives multiple diseases at once. Like, for example, the landmark TAME trial with Metformin, the targeting aging with Metformin trial, which is FDA approved, it enrolled 3,000 older adults, and its primary endpoint is not just a single disease, right? Instead, it measured whether Metformin can delay any major age-related condition or death. So if these kind of studies become successful, this could shift the regulatory thinking to recognize aging itself as a treatable target.
There are things that can be done right now with patients, for example. One example of this is, I believe it's something like 57% of Americans with Alzheimer's disease are undiagnosed. And that's because around 97% of primary care physicians just don't proactively screen for it or ask about it because it's awkward and uncomfortable. But things like vocal diagnostics can detect early Alzheimer's disease in like a 30-second, hey, can you speak into this phone for 30 seconds? And that alone would be worth something like $40 billion to the U.S. economy if we just systemized that as part of annual checkups.
It is a science in progress. It's not a perfect science yet, not by any means, but we do have, organ ages that we can look at. We have the rate of, or the pace of aging that we can look at in context to the hallmarks that can give us an indication of what is going on and which one should we target first. And with regards to multi-omic testing, gut microbiome testing 5 years ago wasn't as conventional, let's say, as it is now, and it's almost standard in any longevity clinic. We add to that proteomics, we add metabolomics. Proteomics, still some clinics do them. It's still more of a research stage at the moment, but companies like SomaLogic are doing a great job by having platforms that can transition you from research to clinical practice and incorporate those. So I'm hoping that those omic profiles of testing can become more mainstream as we move forward. And I think that's something that I'm really excited about because it gives me answers. I always want to have answers for my patients and for myself. And we get answers with these tests, that they're getting more and more precise as years go by.
For me, what gives longevity its meaning is not merely like addition of years. It's just the amplification of life's quality and purpose. I feel like it's the science, policy, business, and human behavior. They all converge onto one undeniable truth, and that health span is a shared responsibility. If each of us commit to even one intentional step in terms of policy or in practice or personal life, we can definitely transform longevity from a distant aspiration into a measurable and meaningful reality. That to me is the true future of medicine. It's just the depth and dignity and vitality to every moment we live. So, thank you.
Beautifully said.
Very briefly, I would probably say to every single stakeholder that is involved across the continuum of longevity, that we should all be shifting to a mindset that is moving us from being passive consumers to active participants.
longevity. I mean, I think everybody here on this panel agrees that this is something that we should do because it's starting to get feasible, and we got like an ethical obligation to actually make that available to on a wide level, not just exclusively to some rich people, but hopefully to everybody at some point. But I think in order to really change this, we have to make people aware of the fact that there are economical benefits in it as well. And what I mean is not on an individual level, but we are living in societies where we have healthcare systems that are largely financeable. They're not stable anymore. So they're definitely going into the wrong direction. You can do the things that you love to do. You will stay more active. So you will generate more wealth. You will, create more wisdom. You will foster this exchange with your following generations. So I think there is such a big impact that this could have potentially on us, as humans, as a race.
Welcome, everyone, to a very anticipated panel about longevity. I want to make some opening remarks to frame up this discussion. Life is a gift that we all have, and advancing research in longevity allows us to make sure that we have respect for the value of life, which is so fundamental. When that is present, there is peace, the economy benefits as well. And when we all think about medicine and our hopes for the future of medicine, we usually measure advances by our longevity. So perhaps our longevity could be the metric of success and advances that we are all so excited about, not just managing chronic disease. And so it's also our responsibility and duty as a generation to ensure that there's continuity of life across generations and that we use technology responsibly and increase the life and health span. As those were some of my reflections as I was really excited about this panel of speakers, and I'd like to introduce them. Dr. David Barzilai is a founder and CEO of Barzilai Longevity Consulting, Harvard Medical School lecturer and faculty and trustee at the Geneva College of Longevity Science. He's a longevity medicine leader, physician, and consultant who works closely with individuals and organizations to apply evidence-based practices in longevity medicine to optimize health. He was our keynote speaker last year as well. We're glad to have him back and support our event, where we always cover this topic. Dr. Dominic Thor is the president of the Geneva College of Longevity Science, GCLS, the world's first higher education institute dedicated to longevity science. Professor of Pharmacy and visiting professor at the University of Medicine and Pharmacy, Carol Davila, UMFCD. Dr. Mishka Chahata is also joining us here. She's the founding member and vice president of the Emirates Lifestyle Longevity Medicine Society. MENA, MENA Regional Ambassador for the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine and the UAE and MENA Region Executive Committee Representative for the World Lifestyle Medicine Organization. She's a UK board-certified consultant physician in family medicine, lifestyle, and functional medicine as well. She established the largest concierge longevity clinic in the GCC, Pura Longevity Clinic, and now serves as the Chief Longevity Officer of the Omics Clinic as well. Chief Medical Officer of Connected Life as well. So as you can see, we have a very strong and diverse expertise here on this panel. I'm going to introduce Keith Comito next, who's the CEO and president of the Lifespan Research Institute, a nonprofit focused on driving forward science to extend healthy human lifespan through advocacy, through ecosystem building, and direct support of cutting-edge research. He has also invented several digital biomarker-related technologies through his work at technology and entertainment companies that many of you probably will know, such as Disney. We also have Dr. Uma Senthil Kumar joining us here today, consultant physician leader in longevity medicine in the UAE, US, double board certified in family medicine, and fellowships in lifestyle and integrative medicine. She has a formal medical degree in Indian systems of medicine, and with over 20 plus years of global practice across 4 continents, she blends cutting-edge science with ancient wisdom to design measurable longevity care models. Also, she's a founder and CEO of the 3-5 Revive, REVIV, an innovative startup offering telehealth and comprehensive health screening programs. So we're going to discuss some of the latest breakthroughs, dispel some myths as well. There's many different perspectives about longevity. And this is your chance to ask them questions as well. I want to start by asking you, what are some of those breakthroughs in longevity medicine most recently that you're most excited about?
I guess I can jump in to sort of frame the conversation by just noting that one of the biggest breakthroughs in recent years is just a conceptual one, this idea of having a framework of looking at aging, such as things like the hallmarks of aging, this categorization of the damages that accrue in the body over time, and creating a roadmap, so to speak, to allow us to address this issue instead of just being an amorphous, unstoppable force. And within that, there are a lot of exciting different vectors that maybe some of the other panelists can talk about, things like epigenetic reprogramming, things like this, small molecules that are like calorie restriction mimetics, etc. So I think I'll just open the floor based on framing it as thus.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Yeah, thank you for kicking us off. Dominic, Mishkat, would you care to maybe highlight what you're optimistic about? Arterial stiffness.
Thank you, Tim. I completely agree with Keith that what has changed the most, maybe, or at least from the perspective of the average patient or consumer, is the way that people think about the topic and how they approach it, and that people generally are way more open towards this idea of tackling aging as an underlying root cause of disease. And I think this is also, in some ways reflected by the way that now the pharma industry is starting to enter this market slowly but steadily. And I just came back from a conference on obesity where there was so much talk about, obviously, the GLP-1 drugs. So basically a peptide that controls how the body reacts to sugar and regulates appetite. And of course, it's about obesity, it's about diabetes, but it's now looked at in so many different ways. There are more than 60 drug candidates now in the works, and they have things running, studies in regards to Alzheimer's, to many other age-associated diseases. So it's a clear sign that the industry is ready to tackle this issue, at least by proxy and probably very soon directly. So I think that is wonderful, because they obviously have resources that we need in order to fight this, let's say, towards or build a healthcare system that is more preventative and more related and focused on aging than just any diseases on their own individually.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Thank you, Dominic. I can add to that, actually, because I do think with the reference to epigenetic testing and multi-omics, that's something that I'm excited about, because epigenetic testing is just adding that layer of precision that we can hone in interventions with. It is a science in progress. It's not a perfect science yet, not by any means, but we do have, organ ages that we can look at. We have the rate of, or the pace of aging that we can look at in context to the hallmarks that can give us an indication of what is going on and which one should we target first. And with regards to multi-omic testing, gut microbiome testing 5 years ago wasn't as conventional, let's say, as it is now, and it's almost standard in any longevity clinic. We're adding to that now different types of microbiome tests, like vaginal, like the oral microbiome testing as well. We add to that proteomics, we add metabolomics. Proteomics, still some clinics do them. It's still more of a research stage at the moment, but companies like SomaLogic are doing a great job by having platforms that can transition you from research to clinical practice and incorporate those. I'm hoping that those omic profiles of testing can become more mainstream as we move forward. And I think that's something that I'm really excited about, because it gives me answers. I always want to have answers for my patients and for myself, because I'm a curious learner. And we get answers with these tests, that they're getting more and more precise as years go by.
I appreciate Keith, Dominic's, and Mishka's excellent responses. Tim, for members of the audience who might be curious about an example of something closer to clinic, this isn't one of the questions that was earmarked for me, but do I have your okay to give one concise example?
Yes, sir, absolutely. We can improvise.
So So just as one example, and by the way, GLP-1 agonists are phenomenally powerful. It's just to pull a plug. I'm going to be on a panel for HLTH Las Vegas together with a representative from the biopharma who's creating it, together with Amy Killen and Weight Watchers. So there is some controversy whether they're true gerotherapeutics, but they are extraordinarily exciting. But as far as the biology of aging, one example is epigenetic reprogramming from the lead by the Sinclair lab. The concept is over time, our cells accumulate methylation marks. Now, some of them are there, methylation marks derived to differentiate one cell from another, like a neuron from a cardiac cell. So they give us our identity, and they tend to shift over time. And some of that shift is that appropriate differentiation to give a cell identity. But some of that shift appears to be not just associated, but causative with aging-associated diseases that promotes disease. So in one elegant model, partial epigenetic reprogramming, we're able to essentially unwind the clock in terms of some of the pathologic methylation changes without the cells losing their identity. And a very concrete examples, one animal model in mice that now is being applied in monkeys is that if you're able to induce vision loss, like in mice from glaucoma, like increased pressure, or even just to crush the nerve, you can actually help them see again through partial epigenetic reprogramming. So these are mice that were literally blind, but then they could, through partial epigenetic reprogramming, they were able to get them to see well enough that their eyes, you could see them track a ball on the wall that they couldn't before. You could actually see the nerve regrow again. So this is phenomenally powerful things that get at the root of many conditions, but that's just one example.
Yeah. Speaking of epigenetic editing, I know that our previous speaker, Amber Salzman, keynote speaker and CEO of Epic CRISPR Biotechnology, was very interested in this panel. She's driving a lot of innovation in that field, in epigenetic editing or gene regulation. So I invite her to also ask questions afterwards. Let's move on to some other questions that have come in and that we discussed as well. Aging. Aging is currently being redefined as various diseases. Metabolic, liver, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease. What kind of breakthroughs do you believe need to happen in the next 1 or 2 years in order to bring longevity medicine more into the mainstream to change our standards of care? Who'd like to take that one first? David, Keith?
Sure, I can jump in to start things off. So sure. Let me just say that I think nothing would do more to accelerate this field than obviously when we have the first undeniable therapy that works, especially in a visible way. Being on the front lines of the advocacy side of things, it's my personal opinion that, a lot of the maybe counterpoints that people might have about extending healthy human lifespan, we're going to get bored, or what about overpopulation, etc. They're really masking the one real one, which is this isn't real, right? Don't even get my hopes up, right? But I think once we have something that is undeniably working, I think that will catalyze public perception and catalyze the field. Now, to get there, on the scientific side, one of the things that I think is very important is biomarkers, accurate biomarkers that can then lead to a properly targetable clinical indication for whatever we want to talk about. Some people want to call it age, some people want to call it something else, frailty, etc. But the important thing is that we have something that you could target in a clinical trial to say we are addressing that. The deviation between biological age and chronological age. And there's a lot of exciting technologies that are evolving around this as well. And, obviously we mentioned epigenetic clocks are one aspect of this. There are blood-based biomarkers. There are functional biomarkers, digital biomarkers based on walking gait, and face, and voice. And that, I think, also has the ability that if we can really define a composite biomarker that's based on these things that the public can understand and regulators can understand and investors can understand, that can really unlock the floodgates, because you can't change effectively what you can't measure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Keith's comment. Keith, that's really spot on. In fact, it's spot on and really touches the heart of what brings us all here today. If we had a biomarker panel that was reliable in the lab, predictive of events, and responsive within months, this could phenomenally shorten trials from decades to just a few years. And now, to the point, once we have one therapeutic I think it's going to start an avalanche of interest because it's a proof of concept moment. But how do we get to that moment? And it's really biomarkers that are going to get us there, because without it, we can't wait decades randomizing people at birth and seeing what they develop decades later. That's never going to be tenable. The one key point for the biomarkers is for actually get the therapeutics. The other is to apply the therapeutics for those of us, and it's lovely being here with my esteemed colleagues of fellow longevity physicians as well as educators, public and school. And we want to, once there are effective therapies, we need to apply them to individuals, and we need to make sure that it's working, right? And I think this is the future of medicine. It's precision medicine where you're able to show it doesn't just work on an average, but it works on the individual. So even more proximal to the biomarkers, which I think is at the crux of it, it's not too early to build in feedback loops in our practices now. So how do we do that? It's a little bit more loose in terms of the biology of aging. It's more like aging-associated conditions, but it's a start. A great example is continuous glucose monitors, right? Like for my patients and clients, you might have a 2-week period of time where you track to see what foods are triggers. You'd be amazed how the same food, like oatmeal, in one person can have one effect and someone else the opposite. So based on seeing those post-meal spikes, you're able to tweak their diet. And there have actually been randomized trials now showing and establishing that a personalized diet works better than even generic Mediterranean diet. Then you retest. Same thing with VO2 max. You get a baseline, you put them on an exercise protocol, and you see what works. So somewhere between the biomarkers and the intermediate, which we should push forward ahead, and where we are right now, it's not too early to be applying this precision medicine approach with the best biomarkers we have available now, so we can improve medicine from the sort of reactive sick care to being proactive, knowing someone's baseline and actually responding in real time to how they're doing now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If I can jump in and just very briefly highlight the work that myself and Dominic do in this space. And I think it's great that we have biomarkers. I fully agree. And the interventions that we need to apply. And then the big piece is the education, like what the clinical interpretation of all of these biomarkers and applying it, just adding on to David's comment there, is really key. And that's very close to my heart. Dominic has set up a whole institute based around that, which we happily contribute to. And the Emirates Lifestyle and Longevity Medicine Society, we do the same. We educate physicians. This can be achievable within 1 to 2 years. When you scale up, you add on lifestyle, you add on functional training, you add on precision training. We don't need to know everything, but we need to have a good foundation to make sense of that information and to have a critical mindset to make do. The most important thing I think as well is that there is a need for policy change, and we do that with the society and other organizations. We can come to that. I think there's a question from John Hemming related to the regulatory environment on that, and we have a question related to that as well, and that's really key. Policy changes within 1 to 2 years can really accelerate change in the healthcare space.
I'm sorry to jump in because I know we got lots of ground to cover, but I think actually because it's a question to the panel from the audience, that regulatory really is a very important issue here, right? Because even as good as the doctors might be in the space, there's only so much they can do without the support of regulatory officials. And it's currently a situation where, depending on where you work, it's completely different, right? So some of the substances that you might use, they might be considered, a supplement in one country, and it's a drug in another, or it's an off-label chemical. And the same for the different kinds of interventions that you see, regenerative or maybe more experimental. So we have students coming in from countries in Southeast Asia where these things are being used. I wouldn't call it excessively, but quite often. And of course, in countries like Switzerland or also Abu Dhabi, to have some example from GCC, of course, the regulatory environment is a bit more conservative. So I think this is one of the challenges for doctors in the space, and of course for patients too, because they hear all sorts of things, and the question whether these things are the right ones for them is not just one for the doctor to answer. It's also something that you have to make as a concession to the environment that you are in. So I think we need to educate also those people more, not just the doctors. I think we have many excellent ones. We need to educate decision makers and stakeholders from various industries, pharma of course, and then politicians.
Yep. And I think we'd be remiss not to discuss educating without pulling a plug for my esteemed colleagues here, who I have all of which I know from various roles. But it's 60% of us have an affiliation with the Geneva College of Longevity Science. I'm not only honored to be a founding faculty, but also on the board of trustees. And something that some individuals who are interested in the policy side may want to consider is through the Executive Master of Science program at GCLS. You can sort of familiarize yourself with the longevity landscape while working with colleagues across eclectic fields and potentially learn how to pull the lever. And the other plug I have to pull here is for Lifespan IO. This is Keith Comito's baby since the very beginning. I followed it since its creation. It's really evolved tremendously and actually had a viable impact in where we are today relative to where we would have been without it. So for those of you who seek to keep up with that, visit lifespan.io, stay abreast, and engage in that community.
Okay, absolutely. So, as you can see, there's a lot of excitement about this panel. We're getting more questions from our audience, and I'll get to them in a little bit. There's one from John as well as Christina Smith, and we'll save them for the last 10 minutes or so. I want to ask you about designing studies, which you alluded to a little bit earlier, right? Because it's very lengthy process and it's very complex to prove efficacy in longevity medicine. How do we fit these medications into current health systems? Can we dig into this a little bit in more detail? Dominic, maybe would you like to start?
Well, I think, one important shift that we need to achieve is this change that we see happening already towards how you approach the topic altogether, right? So I think we all understand that at the moment, the World Health Organization doesn't see age as a disease, but nonetheless, I think we see it as maybe the most important risk factor. The one that comes after maybe is stress, and I think everybody here in the panel knows how impactful stress can be on your health. But age definitely is the one that drives all those major diseases that you will see as the top killers in any statistical list. And this is something that we need to understand and need to make people understand, because only then there will be the willingness to shift from, let's say, a more reactive kind of medicine that we see now being applied so successfully that we actually overcome a lot of these diseases and achieve higher ages, but not necessarily in a healthy state. What we need instead of that is a system.
Uma and Mishkat, would you care to comment?
Yeah, I think Dominic brought the right points right there. So for me, this is a very important question, Tim, because longevity medicine is unlike traditional medicine in how we study and deliver it, right? So first challenge I see is even designing the studies is very complex and lengthy, because traditional trials target like one disease, but here we are aiming to influence the whole biology of aging, which drives multiple diseases at once. Like, for example, the landmark TAME trial with Metformin, the targeting aging with Metformin trial, which is FDA approved, it enrolled 3,000 older adults, and its primary endpoint is not just a single disease, right? Instead, it measured whether Metformin can delay any major age-related condition or death. So if these kind of studies become successful, this could shift the regulatory thinking to recognize aging itself as a treatable target. This brings me to the second point that Keith and Dr. Barzilai were addressing before. So diagnostics and biomarkers, which I see as the main entry point for integrating longevity into health systems. For example, the epigenetic clocks or the inflammatory biomarkers like GDF15 and the longevity proteins such as Clotho, they are really emerging as great tools to estimate your biological age and future risk, right? So the low Clotho levels has been associated with 31% of higher mortality rate. So imagine someone having this as an annual check, along with a lipid profile and blood pressure, you also get an aging profile. That helps physician intervene earlier. So, I feel like longevity medicine shouldn't be a parallel track. In my opinion, it must embed into the existing preventive care model. We already see that happening, like examples of several clinics in US, Mayo Clinic and Singapore. They have launched longevity programs that combine diagnostics like VO2 max and then biological age testing, cognitive screening. They all closely tied back into the routine hospital care. So, and again, I can say UAE has really taken the bold step in 2024 by creating the world's first licensing framework for healthy longevity medical centers. So these centers will provide the data-driven personalized health plans, and that will shift the system from reactive sick care to proactive prevention. Sure. So just want to sum it up saying, like, for clinicians, it is about adopting the new diagnostic markers alongside routine care. For scientists, I would say this is validating the surrogate endpoints that regulators can trust. And finally, for investors and policymakers, it's about building those sustainable, scalable models that can translate the science of longevity to people from all walks of life. Thank you.
Amen. And if anybody believes in that, reach out to try to donate to TAME, because it still hasn't been funded yet, unfortunately. But we need a TAME. Even if it doesn't work, it'll be a regulatory model that proves it works. And here we have another trend, UAE leading the way. I have a whole community of UAE friends. They are definitely leading the way, lifestyle medicine and longevity medicine. So keep up the good work.
Yeah. I just want to build off of everything that Uma, David, and Dominic were just saying. Firstly, on the aging as risk factor, I think this is an important point to just really double down on, because a number or a statistic that is thrown around is 70% of all diseases or deaths are age related, right? I actually think that number is much higher. It's probably pushing into the mid 90s, because if you think about it, age is truly the primary risk factor for almost everything, not just chronic and infectious diseases, but even things like falls and car accidents, etc. Age is a major risk factor. So I think that number is actually, or that percentage is actually like higher, like north of 90%. And, I think what is also important is, as mentioned, that if we have these clinical indications, this could rapidly decrease the speed or increase the speed of clinical trials. So if you're doing a lifespan study, you don't have to wait 30 years anymore to find out what has happened. You can get an assessment of rate of aging. So I think that will compress the timelines in a profoundly transformative way. But leaving the clinic, or leaving the clinical trial scenario into right now, I think it's important to note, as I think Uma was mentioning, there are things that can be done right now that are really like low-hanging fruit, like with patients, for example. One example of this is, I believe it's something like 57% of Americans with Alzheimer's disease are undiagnosed. And that's because around 97% of primary care physicians just don't proactively screen for it or ask about it because it's awkward and uncomfortable. But things like vocal diagnostics can detect early Alzheimer's disease in like a 30-second, hey, can you speak into this phone for 30 seconds? And that alone would be worth something like $40 billion to the U.S. economy if we just systemized that as part of annual checkups. So there's really kind of like low-hanging fruit out there right now that speaks to this issue. That's more of a organization challenge rather than a technical challenge. Right?
I think these two themes that you touched upon, Keith, are interconnected. Because we are a reactive system where we generally have, outside of maybe once a year examination, we wait till something happens and then we treat it. That's shown in two ways. One, it's shown by not addressing the underlying biology of aging, which for those who aren't familiar with aging biology, what Keith's really getting at is the geroscience hypothesis. It's this idea that the biology of aging is the underlying behind, more like mid-90s, even COVID disease. Like if we say, oh, well, that's an infection. Well, how many kids do you know who passed away from COVID? So if we get ahead of things, both in terms of the biology of aging, treating that, and also getting ahead of things by proactively screening individuals, including lifestyle medicine, we'd be so much further along than we are now. Amen.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm glad Keith mentioned that. Mishkat,
I was going to add, so many interesting discussions. I was going to add a couple of points very quickly. The first is that you have an interesting model where longevity clinics can actually, and this touches on what Uma was saying, can actually serve as pilot sites for venture-backed clinics. And this exists, like, for example, Healthy Longevity Clinic is funded by Longevity Scientific Fund, and they run pilot studies for very exciting projects like regenerative therapies, exosomes, gene therapy. So all of those can come into that space when you're designing studies that are smaller, pilot for safety, efficacy, and we can talk about how quickly those can go to the market next. I think Keith is excited about that. But that's one. Gold standard, obviously, for any study is a randomized control trial, like double-blinded placebo. So, but those take time, and we need to work with what we have and build on that. So, and then eventually you can have systematic reviews that look at all of these different types of studies and give you a good weighted number to say, hey, this actually works, this might not work so much. That's one point. The other point is there's a lot of exciting work around leveraging space travel and how it can accelerate aging. So the work of David Furman, for example, associate professor at Stanford, and his work with the Cosmica is really interesting, and that's, I think, going to be expanding more and more in the upcoming years. That if you expose our human DNA and genetics and your blood work onto a continuum or a vacuum that accelerates, that mimics space, because we age much faster, and then you reanalyze it and you can see where you're headed with your disease prediction risks, and actually develop certain diseases under a microscope on a cellular level, right? Looking at the hallmarks of aging. And that's really interesting. And the same, we can also see work of like Giro AI, for example, using quantum to apply that same logic in a different way on blood work, simple biomarkers that you do at your doctor's office that can give you predictive analytics for up to 2 to 5 years for different diseases. So in leveraging those technologies into studies and designing them would be really interesting.
All right. So we mentioned different stakeholders, patients, policyholders, right, government. Where can they intersect in order to make sure that, regardless of where they live, they may not be a patient in UAE who has access to such a clinic, for example, or some other patients. How can they express their duty through action in order to make these preventive treatments available to them? What are some steps or some advice you have for patients and some of these other stakeholders to be more active in pursuing such treatments?
You're looking, Tim, for like a concise one-liner for each stakeholder? There are a lot of stakeholders.
No, I'm open to whatever. Yeah,
I'll keep it concise. I'll keep it concise just to keep us going along. So let's compensate it. Let's think about this, right? For patients, besides participating in clinical trials, they can be proactive, and they can be exactly what Keith was touching upon earlier about engaging with stakeholders. Because when people clamor for change, whether it's precision medicine, to have things personalized for the person, including the kind of clinics Mishkat was discussing, or lifestyle medicine, or they clamor for the funding aging biology at the Division of Aging Biology, for example. That's one thing patients can do. At the biopharma level, they can commit to rigorous but innovative R&D designs, these strategies that have trials that reflect the biology of aging rather than age-specific endpoints. But the regulators play a role there too, right, Tim? Because the regulators need to have an adaptive framework that balances the need for safety with flexibility so that promising longevity therapeutics aren't delayed by outdated models of evaluation. So at the policy side, it's like being amenable to trials like TAME that Uma, you were just discussing earlier, the proposed TAME, and being even potentially having a designation like a rare disease designation, which gives you more flexibility in design, more resources, more streamlining. And finally, payers must evolve for reimbursement structures that reward what we've been talking about, right? Prevention, getting things at the root, getting things early. We can do so much more about it when we do that. So when we reimburse that, we're better off. So where, Tim, does all of this connect? These are my thoughts on it. They can all connect because we can all align by one shared motivation. That shared motivation is extending our health span. So it's lifespan with better health for more years. So that's not just geroscience, right? That's having standards that get us there, trial designs that are compatible with that, incentive models that accelerate R&D, and that all of these things can lead to a responsible adoption of longevity medicine sooner by having those therapies and having those channels.
Yeah. I said earlier that we're going to dispel some myths also because there's a lot of information out there, right? Is this to really ultimately is the goal to live forever, to defy death, as there are some also longevity speakers out there. There's Netflix series as well, right, with all these biomarkers. So Keith, I know you mentioned a myth that I really liked at the panel where you were speaking. Can you just provide us with your perspective on the difference between health span and lifespan?
Sure. So to lead into this, I think there's there's a cognitive bias at play in terms of when people think about whether they actually want this or not. If you were to ask somebody randomly on the street, do you want to live to be 130 years without any qualification? They might be like, oh, I don't know about that, right? But the second they understand that health span needs to be coupled with this, then it becomes a much more desirable proposition. And this ties into the ancient Greek myth of Tithonus. So long story short, the goddess of the dawn, Eos, was in love with a mortal man, Tithonus, and she wanted him to be around longer so that she could love him forever. So she asked Zeus, can you please make him live forever so that I can love him? And because Zeus is cheeky, he granted the wish, but didn't make Tithonus stay young forever, just alive forever. So he keeps getting older and older and more decrepit. So I think this myth sort of embodies that sort of knee-jerk fear that people might have when you just in an unqualified way say, would you want to live to be 150 years old, right? But based on peeling back the layers of that onion through a lot of different advocacy things that I don't have to get into, it becomes clear to me that most people, once they understand that this means health, being functional, being independent, their family members also being independent for longer, people generally have no issues with this. So I think that is a key thing for us as part of this field to keep in mind when we engage the public and policymakers, right? Is to come at it from this very human angle, and that there's no shame in this, even if that means living significantly longer or indefinitely longer. Wouldn't you want everybody that you know to have the choice to be able to defer those decisions to their future selves in good health? Right.
I love that myth. And Tim, in answer to your question, so lifespan is how long you live. Right. Health span is how healthy you live. And how about, I don't know about you guys, but how about both? I don't mind a long, healthy life. More time with the loved ones, more times to contribute, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple of questions here. So one is from a pharmaceutical executive in HR who asks about how do you attract more talent who has the duty, who expresses the interest in advancing further research? How do you attract more top talent in order to study, to continue the research here?
Well, I think in this case, it is fair to say we should highlight that longevity. I mean, I think everybody here on this panel agrees that this is something that we should do because it's starting to get feasible, and we got an ethical obligation to actually make that available to, on a wide level, not just exclusively to some rich people, but hopefully to everybody at some point. But I think in order to really change this, we have to make people aware of the fact that there are economical benefits in it as well. And what I mean is not on an individual level, but we are living in societies where we have healthcare systems that are largely financiable. They're not stable anymore. So they're definitely going into the wrong direction. And we will have to think about times when we are older, we don't have as many kids as we used to. Who's going to look after ourselves? Are we able to work longer because we have to finance that system? And everything seems possible when you are healthy. And when we talk about healthy longevity, this is not just your body actually being fit. It's also the mind, right? We touched upon this before. You can do the things that you love to do. You will stay more active. So you will generate more wealth. You will, create more wisdom. You will foster this exchange with your following generations. So I think there is such a big impact that this could have potentially on us, as humans, as a race. And therefore, I think it makes sense to highlight all of these things. But generally, from my experience, if you highlight that this is actually going to help us, finance the system that we are living in, then more and more regulators will become interested, and policymakers and investors, and we need all that. We need money and we need, guidance. And without that, I think even the best researchers or doctors can't do much.
Yeah. So we have 3 minutes remaining, and I want to make sure that everyone hears each of your final takeaways. There is a question from John Hemming, who's done a lot of research in mitochondrial DNA, and I believe that you addressed it to some extent. But anything else you'd like to add about categorizing aging as a disease and what impact it would have on regulatory costs to simplify the solutions and the access.
I could jump in just to say I appreciate the shout out for mitochondrial work. That's one of the areas of work that we focus on at Lifespan Research Institute, mitochondrial dysfunction, senescent cells as well. Yep. But the main point there is that I think it is really key to just note that this is the most effective way to address the largest drivers of suffering and economic expense in the world, right? So that's the thing that unites everybody, the public, policymakers, investors, everyone. That is the key point to underline, is that this is just simply the better way to do this, full stop. Yeah. And if we can become organized as a society, the socioeconomic boons, I think some studies estimate that 1 year of extended healthy lifespan could be worth $38 trillion to the U.S. economy alone. So if you care about money, that is a perfect justification. But I think what we can't lose is just the moral and inspirational angle of this is a dream that humanity has always had since like the dawn of time, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it's fundamentally a human dream. There's nothing new about the idea. It's just advancing technology. We've always wanted to extend health span to our friends and loved ones and everyone.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Great comments. I couldn't agree more. Let's go around and just make some of our last comments and takeaways, please, for everyone. Who'd like to? Yeah, Uma, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So for me, what gives longevity its meaning is not merely like addition of years. We just heard that from, the voices, remarkable voices here today that, it's just the amplification of life's quality and purpose, right? So I feel like it's the science, policy, business, and human behavior. They all converge to one undeniable truth, and that health span is a shared responsibility. See, my optimism lies in integration where the clinical science can meet with technology, ancient wisdom aligns with the modern prevention, and where purpose becomes a new medicine, right? Because if each of us commit to even one intentional step in terms of policy or in practice or personal life, we can definitely transform longevity from a distant aspiration into a measurable and meaningful reality. That to me is the true future of medicine, not just adding time to life, as Dr. Barzila was saying. It's just the depth and dignity and vitality to every moment we live. So, thank you.
Beautifully said. Yes, thank you.
I can add very briefly. I would probably say to every single stakeholder that is involved across the continuum of longevity, that we should all be shifting to a mindset that is moving us from being passive consumers to active participants. And I think that is critical across the board. And that's my sense.
Thank you. Yep.
I could pick up the ball from Mishkat there for my final comments of if you want to get involved, by all means, go to lifespan.io, as David generously plugged earlier. We have a lot of ways to engage the public, to draw everyone in into decentralized science and advocacy. And right now, we're actually running a crowdfunding campaign at lifespan.io/PLG campaign that is specifically to fund a machine learning based approach to quantify societal sentiment about this topic so that we can better engage these key stakeholders that we're all talking about here today. So if you want to get involved directly, there you go, lifespan.io/PLG campaign.
Dominic, why don't you plug for GCLS with your closing comments, and then I'm happy to conclude.
Thank you, David. Of course, it burned on my tongue. I think what everybody needs to do, and this ranges from the patient to the doctors, and then obviously to the often mentioned stakeholders of all sorts, is education. And I think this is something that we direly need in this field. We I think have very good courses that we can offer, and then there are other types of information that I think can also be meaningful, especially if you start venturing into this field. You don't start by doing a master's degree. Typically, this is reserved for later stages. Initially, you look for insights, and hopefully you'll find them from trusted sources. And it's great to have Lifespan here because some of the biohackers that are getting more and more popular, they maybe due to the medium that they use, they sort of abbreviate things up to a point where it doesn't contain any scientific information anymore. So you have to be careful as a consumer where you get your information from. But trying to be informed, I think this is the way forward.
Beautiful. So this is Dr. David Barzilai, and I think of things through the lens of my hat. I'm a longevity medicine consultant for individuals optimizing health, as well as for organizations around best longevity practices. And the hats I wear, including at Geneva, as a Harvard Medical School lecturer, as a scientific advisor, and as a keynote speaker in different conferences. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Having, with Keith's point about 38 billion, that trillion actually with a capital T, although it's a global figure, not national, but for that, that's from a publication by Andrew Scott and David Sinclair. And the idea of that for any regulators or those in biopharma who are looking at this is it's not just you're lowering cost, you're making people more productive for lifespan. So these investments pay multiple fold if done right. And that's what we're all asking you to do, asking you what role you can play in this. So my thoughts, one of four major takeaways from us and major roles you can take is one, we should fund aging and prevention research with the same commitment we do for late stage diseases. Let's focus on drivers of aging related conditions so we can address them earlier and better. My second point is that clinicians should be trained for prevention and personalized medicine as a craft. I think this should be integrated deeply into our medical education, not just in executive master's programs, from the very beginning, treating prevention with the same rigor as acute care, and also so we can design individualized and personalized care. My third of 4 points is I think the public really deserves clear, unbiased translation of health science, both from periodicals like lifespan.io and from other venues such as Longevity Technology. Phil does some great work there with Eleanor. So not hype, but in headlines, but rather knowing the difference between what's experimental and promising versus what's validated and what's still exciting, even though it's experimental and we should be supporting. Yes, and teaching people the critical skills for them to study. That's one thing on my ex-Aging Doc One account that puts things out there for people to debate. So my final point is I think preventive medicine, we should make it easier for people to employ it than to avoid it. So I think we should have insurance companies understand the value of long time investments too, as well as research funding, and maybe have on the lifestyle piece, like healthy food prescriptions, be subsidized like medical devices. This should be longevity medicine, which was a theme for today. It shouldn't be boutique care for the lucky few. It should be something for all of us. And that's my final point.
Great. Well, thank you very much to all of you for supporting our event, for allowing us to continue to educate on this topic. We invite you to stay. The next panel is at 3:00. Right now, what's holding us from this panel to the next one is actually a competition, a healthcare trivia contest. And I invite all of you to also participate. It actually just kicked off in the Google platform. I know I'm going to have many more questions, and the others, I want to invite them to send their questions as well and comments. So
thank you, Tim, for having us and being a catalyst for longevity change. This is really an incredible event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful, and I'm honored to have shared the stage with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Until next time, guys.
Yes, until next time. Absolutely.